I recently found myself in the market for a Rickenbacker 650. I had seen them many decades ago when I was much younger, but not quite in a position to afford one. Now I've decided to finally scratch that itch. So I looked into the market and I found there was a lot of different Rickenbacker 650s, and it was a bit confusing. I couldn't find any one source of information that told me everything I needed. So I figured I'd make this video to help anyone else that might be in a similar position. The Rickenbacker 650 was a new model introduced by John Hall in 1992. He wanted to reach a new market because Rickenbackers up to that point had mostly, but not exclusively I must point out, been used for rhythm guitar, and he really wanted to reach out to artists that wanted to play Rickenbackers as a lead guitar. So he introduced two new models, the 650A and the 650E. So they first appeared on the January 92 price list, although some do feature 91 serial numbers. The A stands for Atlantis and the E stands for Excalibur. They were very similar instruments to each other. The main differences were the colour of the body, the wood being used, and they either came with chrome or gold-plated hardware. Both featured a neck through the body construction with a one-piece maple neck and maple fingerboard. The Atlantis featured turquoise paint on maple body wings, and the Excalibur had vermilion timber for the wings and a clear gloss lacquer. The turquoise finish for the Atlantis was a deliberate nod back to the 1950s styling that Rickenbacker had on their early combo guitars. On the right here we have a picture of a Combo 800, and you can clearly see the turquoise finish and the maple neck through the body construction. The 650 Atlantis was a modern reinterpretation of that design. I must point out that the model number 650 had been used by Rickenbacker earlier, back in the 1950s. Here's a price sheet from 1957 listing the Combo 650. A couple of options were available, including the turquoise blue finish. Here's a couple of close-ups of a 650 Excalibur. The picture on the right there shows the body contour on the back, highlighting the gloss lacquer. In the other picture we can clearly see, obviously, the gold hardware, but we can also see the humbucking pickups, which were introduced by John Hall to give a higher output that he figured would be accepted by lead guitar players. Here's the March 1993 Rickenbacker price list showing the 650 range had now been expanded to 5 models, with the addition of the Colorado, the Dakota, and the Sierra models. The Colorado was a black painted version of the 650. The Dakota was a natural oiled finished version with a walnut body and chrome hardware. The Sierra was very similar, walnut body and natural oil finish, but with gold plated hardware. The Dakota was the cheapest of the range. It seems paint or lacquer adds $100 and gold hardware also adds $100, making the Excalibur $1,199 on this price list. Now here's some detail about the 650 Colorado from Rickenbacker's own website. A couple of things of note here. It points out the through body construction of the 650 and lists the body of the 650C as hardwood, whatever that means. An error that you might spot is that it mentions having the R tailpiece. Now of course none of the 650 range did have the R tailpiece. They had a unique bridge, which I'll talk about in a minute. One other thing to note about on this page, the eagle-eye viewer will notice that it says the full range of colour glow finishes are available on the 650 Colorado. When the Colorado came out, it was only available in black, but it did come in a range of other colours later on its life. More about that later. Another feature of the 650 range was that they all had 24 fret necks. Here's the spec sheet for the 650 Dakota, which proudly states they only use American farm-grown woods. They state that the oil-rubbed finish is easy to repair, and I can testify to that. It is very easy to remove light scratches and dings. And at no point when playing my 650D do I feel the need for a glossier finish. Here's the spec sheet for the 650 Sierra, also from the Rickenbacker website. As you can see, with typical Rickenbacker style, they've made a mistake here. The last sentence of the paragraph at the top there talks about the 650 Dakota featuring all chrome-plated parts, hardware, knobs and pickup. Well, that's true, but the Sierra, which is what this page should be talking about, features all gold-plated parts. We can also see from these spec sheets one important feature of the 650 range is the slightly wider fingerboard. The standard Rickenbacker nut width is 41.4 millimeters at the nut. Another important point is that all 650s were mono. They never offered the Rickenbacker stereo option on the 650 range. So here we can see at the top the 2004 price list. The 650 Colorado was still listed as Jet Glow finish only here, Jet Glow being Rickenbacker's name for black. By the 2005 price list, the Jet Glow finish only had been dropped and it was just left blank at that point. And on the 2016 price list, they introduced all standard colours. However, other colour options had been available for many years prior to this point, and one of these colours was midnight blue, as pictured here. It also came in ruby red. One thing that I would also like to point out was the 650 Colorado is, instead of having a one-piece maple neck like all the other 650s, the Colorado sometimes had a two-piece maple neck with two pieces of maple joined together with a seam down the middle. However, this was not often on the more transparent colour options. Here's a 650 in Fire Glow, and as you can see, this one is dated, at least by the advertiser, Tidewater Vintage Guitars, as a 2008 model. The Colorado also came in Maple Glow, and if you look very closely, you can see here that this features a two-piece maple neck with a centre seam down the middle of the neck. It's maybe more easy to spot that on the headstock than in the body. Here's a slight enlargement of the head and a couple of screenshots from a video on Foxy's Guitar Show where you can make out the seam lines through the Jet Glow finish of a black Colorado. The 650 Colorado also came in Colour of the Year finishes, and here's one probably in sea green or maybe it's Blue Boy. Either way, it is yellowed somewhat. The seller, Premier Guitars, listed it as 2005, if that helps. Now, I suspect this guitar is also a little modified because it's featuring toaster top pickups and it's got black plastic knobs. Another Colour of the Year, 650C, this time Montezuma Brown. Also listed as being from 2005, so maybe serial numbers and production overlapped years with the Colour of the Year program. If you can help out with that, please comment below. This one clearly has a one-piece neck. Maybe that also changed with year models, not just colours. Can anyone out there tell me if a black Colorado from near the end of production had a one or two-piece neck? Now this one, even though it has the turquoise finish, is not a 650A, it is still a 650C because it has the solid paint over the entire body. It doesn't have the maple neck through finish. So yes, it's a 650C in turquoise. Here's another 650C in a solid colour, in this case white. Again, I suspect this guitar has been modified somewhat and may not have been originally white. We can see that it has a high gain pickup in the neck position and a toaster pickup in the bridge, and somebody's added a Bigsby, thereby also replacing the original bridge. Now, I'm not sure if any of this was factory options or if this was a factory custom built guitar or whether it's been heavily modified, in which case it's probably also been repainted because they would have had to fill up the holes where the screws holding the original bridge would have been in place. And it appears to have a black scratch plate instead of chrome. Speaking of bridges, there were two main different styles of bridges available on the 650 range. Pictured on the left is the earlier one, and pictured on the right is the later style. I haven't been able to establish the date that the bridges transitioned from the earlier to the later style. Maybe if somebody knows, you could drop it in the comments. But they were fully adjustable bridges, with each string being adjustable for intonation, for height, and also string spacing. Each string sat on a little saddle that was adjusted on a little threaded rod within each of the holders. A very rare option that was available on the 650 range was the high-tech vibrato tailpiece, listed as the VH option. Again, I haven't been able to establish exactly what year this option was or was not available. Again, if someone knows, pop it in the comments below. Here's another couple of pictures of the vibrato tailpiece option showing the inner workings, and here it looks kind of similar to a Stratocaster style of vibrato tailpiece. Something that did change in 1995, somewhere between January and March price lists being published, was the 650E Excalibur was dropped and a new model, the 650F Frisco, was added. However, they were actually exactly the same guitar. It was really just a name change from Excalibur to Frisco. I can only assume that the name Excalibur was trademarked elsewhere and Rickenbacker were no longer able to use it. Here's a picture of a Rickenbacker Frisco, which as you can see is in all respects identical to a Rickenbacker Excalibur. Here's the 1993 catalogue showing the 5 650 guitars available at the time: the Atlantis, Excalibur, Dakota, Sierra and the Colorado. Notice that they've bunched the Dakota and Sierra together as basically the same guitar, just that the Sierra had gold-plated hardware. A couple of things to note from this catalogue is that we can clearly see that it says 2 humbucking pickups and a newly designed bridge give the punchy sound ideal for lead guitar. On the spec sheet page on the back of the 600 series 1993 catalogue, we can see confirmation that the Atlantis body is made of maple, even though it's painted in turquoise and we can't see that. This at least gives us some confirmation. And we can see that the Colorado body is also listed here as hardwood. We can also see at the bottom here it says Excalibur is a registered trademark of Rickenbacker International Corporation. I do wonder about that. Because, as we can see by the 97 Rick catalogue, there was no Excalibur. It had been changed to the 650 Frisco. And we can also see from this catalogue that it states that the 650 Atlantis was launched in 1991. Yes, the Rickenbacker 650 range did come in left-handed models. However, they must be extremely rare, as I've only been able to find a couple by going back through very old adverts on the internet. Speaking of adverts on the internet, this is what I found when I simply Googled Rickenbacker 650s for sale in October 2025. 650 Dakotas do seem to be the cheapest ones available, and the prices go up from there. The Colorado is a little bit more, and then the gold-plated models more than that. And of course the Atlantis is fairly rare, so that also has a bit of a premium. So hopefully that's been informative for anyone out there that's interested in the Rickenbacker 650 and is a little bit confused by all the different models in the range. And for those of you that are just watching for entertainment purposes, I hope you also found it interesting.